you see what I'm doing here, and it hopefully is not overly or at all manipulative, but I'm tracing the arc. So that when Tom Wahlrab comes now after 5 years of doing this EAP work, and then somehow, I guess Ellen Marie saw another ad in the paper for director of the Dating Mediation Center. Is that what happened?
That's what happened.
You serious?
No, it wasn't director. It was for for the director position. That comes later, 5 years after we've been a volunteer.
Right.
She saw the ad for the training, so we took the training and we acted as volunteers at the mediation for 5 years.
For 5 years.
When the job came up, and we're transitioning to the Dayton Mediation Center as the director, I applied for the position and got the position.
Nobody poked you in the back?
I was a volunteer, so I knew the current director was leaving. And so I knew the position was going to be opened up.
And you actually stepped up
and I stepped up. I did it on my own.
I'm gratified to hear this.
I honestly, it was a large pay cut.
Wow.
So I did have to talk with my wife. I talked with my father-in-law. He had something to say about how I was taking care of his daughter. So, anyway, I liked the guy, and he was always supportive of me. So I chatted with him, and I got everybody's support, to apply for the position.
And why did you want to do this? Given that, this is an interesting question. Why did you want to do this, considering A, it was a large pay cut, and B, it sounds like the work that you were doing was pretty good and constructive and satisfying.
The work that I was doing with the state was losing its support at the state level. And the handwriting was on the wall. It was going away.
The EAP system support.
Right, it was going away. So, and by that time it had gone away, and I was being shuttled around to other departments where the work just didn't fit me. So, without going into details about that, it wasn't satisfying.
Well, so you were sort of led and pushed along that path, and now this looked like a good opportunity.
Yes, it looked like a good opportunity. I was getting paid very well. I was rising up in the system.
When you started mediating cases of volunteer, and then became director, I'm curious, did it now occur to you that, wow, look at that, in retrospect, when I was doing the EEO work at the hospital, this is what I was doing.
Yeah, right. I did make that connection.
You did?
Yeah, and it was, there was an oh-ho. Yeah.
There was an okay. But now you were actually sitting with people in the same room.
Yeah.
Was that, was that like a surprise to you that, oh, look at this, you can actually put the people in the same room?
I thought that was an amazing opportunity. I mean, that was just, I call it an opportunity, but it's an incredible experience to have.
Right.
And you talked about it before, to be with people as they speak their minds and hearts. And they've tried before, and it didn't work very well. And the response that takes place, and the ensuing discussion, conversation,
right,
and what comes out, and what their experience is, and how they get clear, evolve in their thinking and their actions it's just kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And it's generally a productive and positive and good thing, generally, because they're not out in the street fighting with each other, or they're not gathering support and gossiping with other people. They're not doing the lack of, or
they're not hiring a private detective
to dig up dirt on each other. They're not doing the negative things. This is their opportunity, and most often they take it. They're a little bit, this is the opportunity they have. And, it always doesn't go real well, and sometimes it's real bad, and then it gets good and so forth. But anyway, it's an incredible personal experience for me to be with these people.
So that was kind of a real revelation. Oh, look, yes, I was doing this, but I could have been doing this, and this is much better.
Right.
But then at a certain point, I guess after you took the director position, and you were doing training for new mediators, at some point in time and it sounds like it was really before you noticed the work that Joe Folger and I had done about transformative mediation, or at least our first moves to try to do that, to articulate that. Before you noticed that already, it sounds like, from what I've heard from you before, there was a certain amount of dissonance in what you were doing and the way you thought about what you should be doing, or what you said you wanted to be doing. Do I get that right? There was a kind of a point where you said, look, it's funny, we're doing this, but it's not exactly what we mean to be doing.
There was I think in the mediation literature and the trainings, there was a clear statement that it's a voluntary process, and that people are capable of deciding for themselves what they want to do. And when I watched the training for the first time as the director, I knew I had a level of responsibility that was different than being a volunteer. I mean, clearly I was a volunteer. I didn't stick my nose in anybody's business. I let them run it, and I was grateful to have the opportunity to act as a mediator. I mean, I was just really grateful. I took whatever training they offered, and I took it in. But as a director, I had to look at it differently. I was responsible now, and it looked like a mess to me. I mean, it really did look like a mess. And I respect the people that were doing it. I didn't just lose respect for them overnight like that. But when I saw the training, I just noticed the difference between, it's like, this isn't what I'm doing. That we're saying this, and clearly we're not acting like they're capable because we're making all these decisions for them. I mean, it just hit me.
We're not acting like they're capable, they meaning the parties.
Because we really are making all kinds of decisions for them. And it just, I didn't know quite what to do about it. I did write a little bit of it because we had a little newsletter, and I started writing about it.
Writing, questioning what was going on.
Yeah, the director's column or something in the newsletter, and I also went to some people that were prominent in the field in the area, and I asked them, what should I be doing? What about it? So I engaged them. Michael Lang, Dan DeSteven are two people you're familiar with. They were local, so I brought them in. The ombudsman that I'd mentioned earlier, I had a very good relationship with her, and she called herself a mediator. So I said, okay, well, let's all get together and talk. What should I be doing?
And the kind of thing that you were doing that was uncomfortable was like a stage model, or?
It was a 7-stage model. Yeah, we exactly said who gets to talk first, and you tell your story, then we assess the issues. I can't remember what all the stages were, but
right.
but I've been doing it for a number of years, and I wasn't the only one. There was 5-stage, 7-stage. I mean, there was different ways of doing mediation, and I'd taken trainings from the state, that were all various places, and this is what was happening.
Right.
In mediation.
Right. Absolutely.
So, but when I had a chance to design my own training, and I noticed the dissonance or the disconnect, then I needed to explore it. So I thought about it, wrote about it, invited other people in to talk about it, and started redesigning the manual. And I don't quite know what we did exactly at this point in time, but that's when the book came out.
The Promise of Mediation.
Yes.
Now, before we go into that, I just want to ask you, so this time, while you were sort of shifting from volunteer and then to director, and when you were doing the volunteer mediation, and sorry, misstep there. So the dissonance that you noticed that bothered you was around the issue of capable, capacity. I'm going to put a new word in here, self-determination. In other words, we're saying all that stuff. The parties have capacity, they're capable of making decisions for themselves. That's sort of the whole thing that this is based on. That's the one thing. And the other thing is doing this stuff where we make a lot of decisions for them. That was the dissonance around that issue.
Yeah, when we said one thing and we're doing something else.
And when you were a volunteer mediator, and again, if I look backwards down the arc, down the back, the previous portion of the arc, so it seems to me that maybe the reason that you noticed that dissonance was that throughout this arc building, there was always this underlying or growing conviction about people's capacity to act with strength in themselves, and the best way of helping them to access that is to be supportive of it and not to sort of impose things on them from the outside or the top down. And that's been characteristic of the work you've done for all these years in the ARC, whether going, I think I said all that before, I'm not going to repeat it, from Central State to the EEO and EAP and a team in the prison hospital, prison hospital,
mental health center,
hospital mental center, and now you come to Mediate as a volunteer for 5 years and love it and see that that's very similar to some of the work you've done before, and now you just described, you see this dissonance once you become director, that in the training between what you believe and what you're doing, or what you say you're doing and what you're actually doing, in terms of supporting rather than supplanting, to sort of stick that language in there, party self-determination, party decision-making. But you were doing it for 5 years before you became director. And I'm just curious whether any time during that 5 years that dissonance struck you.